Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Good morning to you. On the Washington Post this morning, the lead story: as U.S.-China rhetoric grows harsher, new risks emerge with Taiwan drawn into the mix. It is a Jerry Hsu, Eva Dow, and Ann Guerin comprehensive story on a long list of growing tensions, including yesterday's press conference by Mike Pompeo, which opened with a long list of complaints by the Secretary of State about China, including what the Chinese Communist Party has done to obscure and delay response to the global pandemic. I am joined by Lieutenant General Steve Kwast, who is the former commander of air education and training. He's also an expert on the PRC, responding to the PRC, big advocate for Space Command. Good morning, General Kwast. Good to have you back on the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You've been warning for a number of years that tensions between the PRC and the U.S. were not out in the open, but they were growing. Are you surprised by the very sudden turn they've taken into center stage spotlight? And I mean, there's no doubt about it. We're in a showdown.
Yeah, no, there's no surprise whatsoever. This is a classic page out of their strategy that they articulated 30 years ago. So nobody who's paying attention should be surprised.
So what is that strategy that they articulated? What should we expect from them in the coming weeks, months, and indeed couple of years?
Well, we can expect that they will take advantage of anything that's going on in the global environment, whether accidental or intentional, to try to cripple our economy. The strategy essentially is to dominate information, and 5G we've talked about before is part of that strategy, and dominate energy, and using space as the primary platform or geography to be able to paralyze other countries economically.
I'm going to come back to space in just a second. There is a Wall Street Journal story this morning, General Kwast, that a new coronavirus outbreak in China has prompted a limited lockdown. It's in Jilin City and a suburb of it, Shulin. How much should we believe the stories on the extent and prevalence of the virus in China? I mean, I actually don't think we have any visibility at all into that country.
Well, it's true. It's part of this age-old truth that information dominance is the beginning of all control. And when you have a country that's entire existence from the party's sense of perspective is control, that information is the first step. So the Chinese people, as we've said before, Chinese people are beautiful. The Chinese people need to be part of the world community. The Communist Party is a threat to Western civilization. It always has been, and information. And so you can't trust anything that you hear out of China until we get ground truth that we see the facts ourselves.
General Kwast, one of the things that you've talked about is that if we have a conflict with China, first shots will be fired way, way above our heads, up in space. How would that unfold? What would be the first thing that people should say, uh-oh, about?
Well, and here is why China is such an important competition to focus on, is that they are very clever and they are very subtle. And their goal, they learned from Pearl Harbor. They do not want to wake the great giant. And even right now with the coronavirus, they're worried that they have awoken America, and that's why they try to propagate this lie that the coronavirus was delivered by the American military. And there's still many people in the world that believe that because of China's One Belt, One Road and 5G network, and their ability to put people on boards of directors and in the corporate boardrooms of companies around the world. But this really, the first shot will not be heard with China, as opposed to Russia and other cultures that are more aggressive and more out there. China wants to strangle America as they go out economically with a whimper. This is an economic war, and China will back off before it comes to blows unless they feel like it is fait accompli, where there is nothing we can do, that their slow-growing vine around the spinal cord of the American economy is sufficiently suffocated our capability to respond. Only then would you see them go to violence. Otherwise, they do not want to wake us. They want us to go out quietly.
It's a little bit late for that now, isn't it, General? Have we passed the point of no return in terms of transparency as to the conflict? And I say that fully aware that I read Dr. Kissinger's book and Graham Allison's book and Michael Pillsbury's book. They have a tendency to strike out boldly and with ferocity, and they did so when they shelled Taiwan, when they joined the Korean War, when they invaded Tibet, when they attacked India, when they attacked Vietnam. They have a Tiananmen Square, most recently Hong Kong. They have this history of sudden outbursts. Are we at the flashpoint for one of those?
It's very hard to tell for the same reason you pointed out, that you don't know what you can trust. You don't know the information. You don't know what is in their mindset and what they are experiencing with regard to their own perspective. But I will tell you this, that it is not too late. America still has not only tremendous competitive advantage, but this is why so many of us have been crying for so long for the American people to pay attention to this, and for the politicians to finally get their act together and start focusing on this great competition with China economically. And it's because you cannot predict when they are going to react, because you have no insight into the inner sanctum of Chinese thinking, because they try to control the information. So the preparing for the unexpected is one of the key attributes of our military to protect our economy, our government, and our sovereign soil and our people. And right now, we are not prepared for the unexpected, but we could be if we would focus. So for me, the one thing we have to learn out of this coronavirus is that if we allow our space industry and our space activities to be crippled because of China taking advantage of this coronavirus to hurt our economy, then they will have the upper hand, because whoever controls the high ground of space will control information and will control energy, because they control a neural network that will be able to compete with anything we build terrestrially within our continental United States.
Yeah, I see that the Teddy Roosevelt has set sail from Guam. It's back at sea after its coronavirus-induced port call that extended for many weeks. How reliant is a carrier on space material and information?
Totally. I mean, you take away space, and there have been war games that have revealed this, and you can read about them. If you're interested in actually watching how these play out. But every war game we play where you take space away is a disaster. And so that's a wake-up call. Yet people try to flavor it and color it. And my favorite example of discontinuity intellectually is when they'll play a war game and it'll go totally south, because when you take away space, you take away your logistics. And they'll white card it and say, well, we'll pretend that the logistics is good. Now what's the outcome?
What's white carding it mean, General? They'll white card it. What does that mean?
You ignore it. In other words,
okay.
You're playing out a war game and you're failing because you can't get your logistics, your fuel, your water, your ammunition. You can't get your forces to the point you need to get them. And if you can't get them there, white carding means that the leaders of the war game will say, well, let's just pretend that all our stuff is there. Let's pretend we do have enough water, enough fuel.
Oh my gosh, I didn't know you could do that. I just finished rereading Citizen Soldiers, and if they had white carded logistics in Europe, Patton could have gotten to Berlin in 4 weeks. They ran out of gas. I mean, there's no white carding logistics.
Right, and so this gets to the mindset of it's human nature. So you have to just be aware of this. That human nature, the people that are running the war games, have been given the job to win. And if they can't win, and this war game reveals it, it's very easy for people to try to justify and say, well, it's not our fault that we don't have logistics because this, that, and the other, and it'll take 10 years and so on. And so they tend to put a happy face on a bad story. And this is something that everybody should be looking at. Logistics, Alexander the Great said it too. Wars are won by logistics, or as Eisenhower said, amateurs talk about tactics, professionals talk about logistics.
So let me ask you to close this out, General. The first shot, we won't hear it. It won't be like the first shot in Sarajevo. It won't be like Germany invading Poland. We won't hear it. What will it look like if it occurs in space?
Silence. In other words, you're on your ship, you're in your tank, you're in your plane, and you can't hear anything. Nobody's talking to you. No, you can't talk to anybody else, and you're wondering why can't I communicate?
You know, this morning that Israelis woke up. This morning, Israel's been in a cyber conflict with Iran for a couple of weeks, and people don't know this. This morning, Israelis woke up and Iran had hacked pretty much every internet access point, saying a warning, a surprise is coming. And that was in response for Israel shutting down their port, which is in response for Iran messing with their water supply. All of this,
Yep.
not a shot fired. It's all going on behind the scenes.
That's right. So you're exactly right. So one of the things the American people need to realize here is that our information infrastructure was never designed to be able to deal with an adversary like China, who is trying to dominate the information domain globally. And when we talk about infrastructure investment in the future, we as the American people need to demand that in this 21st century, protecting our information is as important as protecting our sovereign soil. Just look at how much dependency we have on our information, our banking, our medical, and it's all vulnerable because the internet is vulnerable by design. So it doesn't have to be that way. If America, for example, were to throw up the kind of satellites that gives us gateways to be able to communicate with American gateways designed with private-public partnerships with companies that have the capability, you can design information infrastructure that you can trust. It's just that we're trying to use the internet, and it was designed to be open and collaborative, and you will go bankrupt before you make the current infrastructure secure.
General Stephen Kwast, thank you. Always a pleasure talking to you, General. You got to get on Twitter so I can tell people how to find you. I appreciate the morning this morning. Thank you, General Kwast. Some of you are asking me, what am I wearing? That is my circle ring. Go to bodymetrics.com. If you want to know your oxygen level, you want to know all your sleep cycle information. I forgot to take it out this morning. It's just one of those things that you wear and you forget. It's well worth the expenditure. More information on your more observational technique, not diagnostic tool. It's an observational tool. How well did you sleep? How many REM cycles? How many deep sleep cycles? How much minutes? How did you have any oxygen deprivation events, etc.? You go to Body Metrics, Body, B-O-D-I Metrics. I love this thing. I wear it every night, and then I forget to take it off in the morning. You will love it, too. You also love givingmasks.com/Hugh. There's a reason they're called Giving Masks, that for every box of masks you buy, they donate a mask to a frontline worker in need. So go get your givingmask.com/Hugh. Givingmask.com/Hugh. And then ReliefFactor.com time. There it is. Got it out. Dropped it. Picked it up. And 9 miles yesterday. Started listening to In the Shadow of the Sword by Tom Holland, his wonderful history of Islam, following his wonderful histories of Rome and Christianity. And my 4 pills. My lukewarm coffee, and it will continue to be lukewarm. I haven't got any hot coffee, but I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega, the 4 natural supplements I take every morning. I take them in the first hour. I remind you about them in hours 2 and 3, and I also remind you about Honor Bound Coffee, produced by the same people that make ReliefFactor.com. The difference. 100% of the profits from Honor Bound Coffee go to support military families. 100%. And they are going to be foremost in our minds on Monday, Memorial Day. Those who have lost everything, made the ultimate sacrifice, have left families behind. The great way to honor this year's Memorial Day, subscribe to Honor Bound Coffee and come right back. Okay, Hugh. 51 minutes after the hour, America. It's Hugh Hewitt, joined now by former Israeli ambassador to the United States, Dr. Michael Oren. Good morning, Michael. How are you?
I'm good, Hugh.
Did you wake up and see a website of yours hacked by Iran? Because I'm looking at the Times of Israel. Israeli websites hacked in cyber attack. The screen says be ready for a big surprise. How about, did you see it yet?
No surprises. No, nothing there yet. But this is tit for tat. They attacked our water supply, and according to reports, we attacked their port. But this is all building up to what's going to happen after November, Hugh, because if Donald Trump wins and he continues to put punishing sanctions on Iran, they'll have to make a choice. They're going to have to negotiate with him under humiliating circumstances, or they're going to start a war with us. Or if, say, Biden wins and he renews a nuclear deal, then Iran will take the $100 billion from that deal, build up its military capabilities, and they'll make war against us in another 5 years when the deal expires. Either way, we're heading toward a confrontation with Iran.
Now, there was a story yesterday that American warships have to be very wary of Iranian speedboats coming close because they want to trigger an event. They want us to shoot down one of their boats. Do you agree with that assessment, Michael Oren?
I can't eliminate it. You really can't, because Iran may want to create a situation where it's creating the impression that Donald Trump has led America into another Middle Eastern war. I think it would be a gross miscalculation, because the United States can do things to Iran that Iran can't fight back. America has B-2, B-52 bombers that bomb from 50,000 feet in the air. There's nothing in the Iranian defense system that can touch a plane bombing from that level. The United States can knock out Iran's essential infrastructure, almost all of its military, within a night of bombing.
All right, so let's hope we don't go there. Let's talk about going to where Benjamin Netanyahu will be on Sunday, in court. Does he actually physically show up? Will we be watching? Will Israel be watching Netanyahu the way America watched O.J. Simpson?
Well, I don't know about O.J. Simpson, but if O.J. Simpson wasn't wearing a mask, Netanyahu will be wearing a mask. But for the first time in this nation's history, a sitting prime minister will appear in court and will have to defend himself against 7 charges, including fraud and improper behavior.
How long is this supposed to last? And then there's only 2 results, guilty, not guilty, or somewhere in between in terms of a number. But if there is a guilty charge among the 7, what happens?
Well, it depends which of the 7. I think the fraud charge is far more serious than the sort of improper behavior, breach of trust, which are very sort of nebulous charges. Fraud is very specific. It's going to take at least 4 or 5 months just to hear out all the various cases, to examine the evidence. These cases can drag on for a long time, and that's one of the reasons why Netanyahu wanted to be prime minister first in this rotation. Because again, under Israeli law, every minister who has been indicted must resign, with one exception: the prime minister, who can defend himself in court, and that's precisely what's happening.
Does he intend to show up every day if it's going to go on for month after month? The American defendant always shows up. Is that going to be the case in Israel?
He'll show up when the court tells him he has to show up. And that's
Okay.
what happened last week. He didn't want to come next week, but the court said you had to be there. And so there are times when you have to show. Former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert only showed up in court very rarely, when the court actually insisted that he did be present. He was present.
All right, now very quickly, 36 new ministers, 18 sub-ministers. You've got more ministers than I've got affiliates. That's not true. I've got 400 affiliates. But what do you make of the collection of characters that make up the vastly expanded Israeli cabinet?
It's not a great situation. I mean, here we have 30% of the population unemployed. We've got a massive national debt because of the COVID-19 crisis. And these ministers cost a lot of money. There's staffs, there's drivers, there's budgets. There's estimates of about $1 billion in costs for all of these different ministers. And many of the ministers have absolutely zero qualifications for the jobs they hold. So, and many of the ministries are completely made up and don't really have much function. So just in terms of the public's, the credibility of our political system in the eyes of the public, it's really taken quite a blow. On the other hand, Israelis understand that this very unfortunate situation is probably better than going to a 4th round of election, which would have been probably ruinous.
So this goes at least a year and a half, right? And then we find out whether Netanyahu actually relinquishes the reins of power to Benny Gantz, which I'm not betting on. Are you?
Can't be certain of it. However, there may be all sorts of other deals in the wing. Here's a rumor that's been floating around. You'll like this one, that Netanyahu wants to be president of Israel. You know, we have a prime minister, president. The president is largely a ceremonial position, but it has great moral authority. And if Netanyahu would announce his candidacy for president in a year and a half, that's the period in which the current president, Ruvi Rivlin, will be concluding his 7-year term, then many people will vote for Netanyahu. Even people in the opposition will vote for Netanyahu to be president. Guess why? Because they
Get him out
of Knesset. They want him out of Knesset.
Is that an elected position? Is that elected?
It is elected by the Knesset. And so they could vote him, then he'd be president for 7 years. He gets out when he's about 80, at which point no one will remember all these charges. How about that one?
All right, that's news. Michael Oren, that's why we always talk to you from Israel. Thank you. Follow him at Dr. Michael Oren, Dr. Michael Oren on Twitter. Follow me to hour number 2. General Deptula joins me as he does most Thursdays. Don't go anywhere, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree Summer Camps. Click on the banner at hughhewitt.com.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt. Greetings to all my 400 affiliates. If you're watching on our YouTube channel, good morning to you. On Instagram, on Facebook. I think you're still watching even after yesterday's conversation with Mark Zuckerberg. It was friendly. It was fun. I'm joined by Lieutenant General David Deptula, Dean of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. Good morning, General. How are you?
Hey, good morning, Hugh. I'm doing fine today. How about yourself?
Good. I want to start with an off-the-wall question. One I asked Mark Zuckerberg yesterday. I'm just testing it out on a few people. Did you play Risk as a boy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm coming to correlate the young men who play Risk with ambition. Now, I've got no brief with ambition because Alexander said it's the highest fame is the highest ambition of the noblest minds. But Risk seems to be a concurrent. It has occurred in Zuckerberg, senators, congressmen, generals. I just think Risk is a indicator of something.
How about yourself? Did you?
Oh,
play
yes,
the game?
I was an obsessive Risk player. Absolutely.
Okay,
John.
well, I'm still looking for somebody to play. My family's kind of bailed out on me on Risk because I get too intense over the damn thing.
Oh, General, I kind of gave up after I skinned both my boys repeatedly, and having never I would always get the younger one to side with me and then destroy the older one. And then once he began to figure that out, I stopped playing him because I wanted to retire undefeated. But I'd play you. That would be fun. General, look, we're laughing, but there are a couple of very serious things going on. First of all, nobody knows this, but Egypt and Ethiopia appear to be on the brink of armed conflict over a dam. Tell me what goes on in the Pentagon when two alleged allies of the United States are close to coming to blows over a dam that, if is filled, will affect the downstream waters in the Nile.
That's one that I personally don't have any insight into. But the underlying question is, what goes on inside the Pentagon? Well, first, this particular issue, number one, is a whole-of-government issue. And the first agency that comes to mind, our cabinet-level organization, is the State Department. So what you would see is high-level coordination ongoing between the leadership inside the Pentagon and the State Department to actually figure out just what are the underlying conditions. And then what you would see is the commander of the respective combatant command who has responsibility for that area, in this case the Africa commander, would be developing courses of action to take based on what the probable outcomes might be. So the combatant command there would be in constant touch with the senior leaders in the Pentagon as well as the State Department to figure out what's ground truth, finding out exactly what are the conditions that surround the conflict, the potential conflict, and then they develop courses of action accordingly.
Okay, now I'm giving you just information for inputs for hypotheticals. The headline is Ethiopia deploys missiles as Nile dispute with Egypt escalates. Both Egypt and Sudan have expressed strong opposition to Ethiopia unilaterally filling the Great Renaissance Dam. The plan is to begin filling it in July, and Egypt's armed forces have been put on the highest level of alert, and Ethiopia has responded. Now, if I understand correctly, and there's a good shot that I don't, Ethiopia is in Africa Command, but Egypt is in Central Command. Am I right about that?
Yes.
So what happens when the combatants involved in this dispute are straddling our division of the world?
Well, it's an interesting question. By the way, this is not new. In fact, during Operation, as far back as Operation Desert Storm, Turkey and the forces that were located in Turkey that were used against Saddam Hussein's regime were under European command's control, and the forces located in the Gulf region were under Central Command's region of control, and we were actually fighting a war with that theme. And what happens is, there are liaisons set up between the two commands. One becomes supported and one is supporting. So I don't know what the final arrangements would be. I would suspect, I don't even want to prognosticate on that one because I don't know who would be supported versus supporting. But that seam is pretty much taken care of in that context. One command is supported, the other one's supporting, and you've got one person in charge.
All right, so now I want to switch completely to Iraq and to the scene of Iran's ballistic missile attack on the United States base at Al-Assad. I had a chance this week to talk with a veteran of that conflict who was there before and after the attack, had been evacuated when the missiles hit. They did a lot of damage, and the ballistic missiles are big deals. How competent are the Iranians as they begin to threaten our fleet in and around the Arab Gulf? How competent are they at targeting their missiles? Because it seems like they hit pretty doggone exactly where they intended to hit. They didn't really want to kill any Americans. They came close to doing so by mistake. But did they? Some Americans were injured, according to the Purple Heart citations that are public. What did that tell you about their capacity?
Well, it tells me that there's an increasing capacity to become increasingly accurate as technology explodes across and around the globe. So it's not necessary, although competency has a lot to do with it, so does the proliferation of advanced technologies. And it also harkens for the importance of ballistic missile defense, which you've quietly seen being moved into Iraq to protect locations where U.S. forces operate. And this is a subject area that is going to garner more and more attention as we see events like what you described, Iran launching ballistic missiles at locations where U.S. forces are deployed. So, yeah, competency has a piece to do with it. You don't have the most competent military, but oftentimes technology erases that disadvantage, and that is an issue that we need to pay more and more attention to.
Okay, last question. Bad week at Elgin Air Force Base. An F-35 crashed and F-22 crashed. That's a lot of money. Both pilots are safe, by the way. That's why I talk about the money. Thank goodness.
Right.
Both pilots are safe. What do you infer from that, General Deptula, when you lose a 35 and a 22? Those are both high-end aircrafts.
Yeah, they are, but if you look at the statistics, when was the last time that we lost an F-22? Or when was the last time we lost an F-35? Flying, particularly combat flying, is a highly dangerous activity. And so, because we have made it look easy, if you will, relatively easy, people have come to expect the kinds of safety statistics that one might see in the airlines. But the fact of the matter is these airplanes don't just fly from point A to point B with putting no stress on the aircraft. These are highly complex aircraft that go through a variety of different kinds of maneuvers. In the case of the F-22, the preliminary indications is that there were some sort of an error that occurred inside the aircraft control computer, or a glitch that happened. And as long as you're flying electromagnetic systems like this, you're going to have challenges and errors and breakdowns that ultimately sometimes result in the loss of an aircraft.
Is there an NTSB equivalent in the Pentagon that descends upon a crash site and just reverse engineers it until it knows exactly what happened?
Absolutely, Hugh. This is a part of what happens inside. It's not the Pentagon, it's the Air Force itself. Initiates an Air Force safety investigation, and they go out there. These are individuals that are trained in aircraft forensics, if you will, to find out exactly what happened.
All right, last question. The TR, thank goodness, is back at sea, according to Politico this morning. How long till their pilots get back up to speed, General?
That depends upon what they were doing, and you have to forgive me. I don't know what they were doing during the interim when the TR was disengaged. They could have been operating to maintain proficiency out of Anderson Air Force Base. I just don't know. So that's one you'll have to ask your Department of the Navy friends.
I will do that, General. Always a pleasure to talk to you. I love getting smart takes on obscure stuff like Ethiopia and Egypt on the brink of war from General David Deptula, Dean of the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies. You can follow him on Twitter at Deptula_David. Coming right back, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I hope you're up and having a good morning. It is Thursday, the 21st of May in the year of the pandemic 2021. No, actually 2020. I'm just joking with you. It's going to be over soon, I think. I think the numbers look good. I think that all of America except Massachusetts is in some phase of reopening. And I am very, very, very optimistic. Very, very optimistic that it's going to go well. We will see. I will know when the Pint House reopens in Columbus. That's Urban Meyer's restaurant in Columbus. I just taped an ad for Columbus, so I'm thinking about Columbus, for Smithco Equipment. I got, this is a perfect ad for me because it's for the Bad Boy lawnmower, the elite model Bad Boy. Head over to Smithco on Route 40 in York Road in Pataskala. Now, most of the country doesn't hear me when I do a local read like that. But I'm doing this nationally because I just love the name of this, the Bad Boy Mower, the Elite Mower by Bad Boy. Now, basically, I'm a big lawn mowing kind of guy, and so if there's a mower out there named Bad Boy, I ought to be in the TV ads for it, is what I think. I think that's pretty much built to my specifications. Good to have you, everybody. I want you to listen to Ron DeSantis. This is my favorite moment of the day yesterday. He's out on the White House lawn, and he takes it to, quote, the narrative, which is sort of the big blue bubble that buzzes around the White House. Cut number 16.
Our data is available. Our data is transparent. In fact, Dr. Birx has talked multiple times about how Florida has the absolute best data. So any insinuation otherwise is just typical partisan narrative trying to be spun. And part of the reason is that because you got a lot of people in your profession who waxed poetically for weeks and weeks about how Florida was going to be just like New York. Wait 2 weeks, Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened. Not only do we have a lower death rate, well, we have way lower deaths generally. We have a lower death rate than the Acela Corridor, D.C., everyone up there. We have a lower death rate than the Midwest, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. But even in our region, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida has the lower death rate. And I was the number one landing spot from tens of thousands of people leaving the number one hot zone in the world to come to my state. So we've succeeded, and I think that people just don't want to recognize it because it challenges their narrative, it challenges their assumption, so they got to try to find a boogeyman. Maybe it's that there are black helicopters circling the Department of Health. If you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you.
Ron DeSantis took the whole narrative crowd to the woodshed. I'd play what Lindsey Graham said, too, but I'm still mad at Lindsey because he won't get up. I talked to his comms director yesterday. Man, he's got the sweetest Southern drawl. Kevin, if you're listening, sweetest Southern drawl I've ever heard. Off the record, I can't tell you what he said, but I can tell you what I think. I think Lindsey doesn't like to get up early. I think Lindsey's going to get elected with 105% in South Carolina. He doesn't get up early. Now, he goes on. Where is this from, Dwayne? Lindsey Graham's comment on Cross. I think I might boycott.
I think he was in the Senate halls.
Yeah, I just think I'm going to boycott Lindsey till he gets out of bed and talks to us. He used to come on when he faced a pretty tough reelection. We love Senator Graham. He's the funniest member of the Senate. Do I hear an amen on that, Dwayne? Is he the funniest guy in the Senate?
I don't know. Ben Sass would challenge that.
Nah, he's from Nebraska, doesn't know anything about football, and has a flat voice.
That's got nothing to do with comedy.
Well, now, Graham's quick, and he's amusing, but he ain't coming out. We're going to boycott playing audio clips of him until he comes up. Time to tell you about the markets, andrewandtodd.com, Sierra Pacific Mortgage, andrewandtodd.com. Together, they provide you with the refinancing you need, the cash you must have, and they do so in the sort of way that leaves you feeling like that's the best organization I've ever dealt with. The 10-year Treasury dropped down to 0.68% yesterday. It'll probably stay low today. It's a signal that even though oil is back up to $34, that's very good, the 10-year Treasury stays low. The business story of the day is that oil is rising and interest rates are not. You can still buy a house and refinance a house at the greatest rates ever. And you do that with Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian by calling them at 888-888-1172, which you should do today. Especially if you're an older person who lives in a house that has equity in it, give them a call about a reverse mortgage. You can trust them. I've known them forever. 888-888-1172 or answer a couple of questions online at andrewandtodd.com. Tell them Hugh Hewitt sent you. I'll be right back with Robert Costa. Welcome back, America. 33 minutes after the hour, joined now by Robert Costa, host of Washington Week in Review. You can watch him tomorrow night on every PBS affiliate across the United States. Of course, he's with the Washington Post, also my colleague at NBC and MSNBC. Good morning, Robert. How are you?
Good morning, Hugh. Doing well.
Good. Yesterday at this hour, I was talking with Mark Zuckerberg, and I asked him, Joe Biden said some bad stuff about you in December to the New York Times editorial page, and I quoted it to him. And he said, that's obviously when you run an enterprise like mine, that isn't the type of thing you want to see. Why do Democrats hate Zuckerberg?
Well, you see Zuckerberg as a political target across the board, from Josh Hawley, the Republican senator, to Democrats. Big tech is a political foil. It's something that's seen as very entrenched with government in the eyes of critics left and right. And so Zuckerberg and a lot of titans out there in the tech world find themselves not being seen as kind of the keys to the economy in the 21st century, but as something that's almost like akin to Big Brother, but in the private sector.
So why do you think Zuckerberg reached out to do my show? I'm just curious because it usually correlates with an ambition of the PR. I've known him for a long time, and I've talked to him on a couple of occasions off the record. I don't know him well, but I'm not surprised to hear from him. But what is the PR objective at this point?
Well, I'm not his PR person, but I would say it's clear Zuckerberg does not want to be seen as someone who's of the left. He wants to be seen more as a businessman who's down the middle. He's tried to reach out in the past to conservatives, you know that. And this is part of that effort to try to just change the way Facebook is perceived, because Facebook, as I said, is perceived. He's more concerned, in my view, based on conversations with tech people, about people like Hawley and others who have really gone after him from the right than necessarily from the left, because he knows the left is never really going to like big tech for a variety of reasons, the global economy, its scope of work, etc.
I agree. I think you define that. He does not want to be understood to be a man of the left, in the way that I understand Google to be. I don't have any opinion on our mutual boss, Jeff Bezos. I don't think he has much of a political profile, although the president doesn't like him. I don't think of him as particularly political. Bob, that Zuckerberg interview led me to a new question that I asked a lot of guests. I want to test you now. Did you play Risk as a child?
More of a Monopoly man.
But no Risk at all?
A little bit. Played Risk. The games took too long, so and the pieces would often fall away, and people would get angry. So it wasn't a favorite on our street.
Okay. The reason I asked is Zuckerberg is a big Risk fan, and James Lankford showed up, and he was a big Risk fan. And General Deptula just told me
it's a brainy game. It takes a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, it correlates with, I think, some ambition across various silos. Let's talk a little bit about governors. Ron DeSantis came out, I'm sure you've seen the clip, and just railed about the so-called narrative yesterday. I want to play this for you and then get your response. Ron DeSantis in front of the White House talking to the White House press corps yesterday.
Our data is available. Our data is transparent. In fact, Dr. Birx has talked multiple times about how Florida has the absolute best data. So any insinuation otherwise is just typical partisan narrative trying to be spun. And part of the reason is that because you got a lot of people in your profession who waxed poetically for weeks and weeks about how Florida was going to be just like New York. Wait 2 weeks, Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened. Not only do we have a lower death rate, well, we have way lower deaths generally, we have a lower death rate than the Acela Corridor, D.C., everyone up there. We have a lower death rate than the Midwest, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. But even in our region, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida has the lower death rate. And I was the number one landing spot from tens of thousands of people leaving the number one hot zone in the world to come to my state. So we've succeeded, and I think that people just don't want to recognize it because it challenges their narrative, it challenges their assumption, so they got to try to find a boogeyman. Maybe it's that there are black helicopters circling the Department of Health. If you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you.
Robert Costa, you don't believe in black helicopters. You're a very good reporter. What do you make of Governor DeSantis's bit of fury there at the White House press corps?
It's an interesting clip because I sat down yesterday with the mayor of Miami, Florida, Francis Suarez. He's a Republican mayor of Miami, and he praised DeSantis. And I pressed him on that point because DeSantis, he said, has allowed the rest of Florida to reopen, but he has allowed Miami to stay pretty closed and shuttered. Miami is still in a lockdown type situation, not necessarily a lockdown, but people are trying to stay home. Businesses are mostly closed because Miami, due to Miami Airport and other factors that DeSantis referenced, is a global crossroads. And so DeSantis, he made this decision to have this partitioned regional reopening of Florida, which turns out to be one of his key decisions as governor, because that kept someone like the Miami mayor from revolting and saying, I got to do it my way. DeSantis has let him do it his way. The challenge, though, for DeSantis is like so many governors. I also spoke to Pete Ricketts yesterday, is nursing homes. I mean, nursing homes and the elderly are such vulnerable populations at this point. And Florida may still have challenges there.
You know, I am not putting a lot of blame on Andrew Cuomo. I think that the pandemic is the worst story in the world for dealing with blue-red lenses. And unfortunately, some people can't take off their blue-red glasses. You can. I think Washington Week in Review does a very good job of taking off blue-red glasses. But right now, those who wear red glasses are railing at Andrew Cuomo for his directive to send old people to retirement homes, and they're blaming him for the deaths of thousands of people. Nobody intends anybody to get sick, right? Everybody's doing the best that they can. Every decision, the CDC didn't intend to blow the test up. Ron DeSantis intended only good. Andrew Cuomo intended only good. Governor Newsom only intended good. Does the media have a problem, Bob Costa, taking off the political lens in a presidential year for a story that is completely apolitical?
Well, to me, it's not really a media question. It's a cultural question. Peggy Noonan wrote about this in her column over the weekend. For example, I talked to Pete Ricketts yesterday, right? And Nebraska has had a few hundred deaths, a few thousand cases, and he never had a stay-at-home order. So for people in Nebraska, it's a totally different experience than New York. It might as well be a different planet in a way. It's the same nation. Everyone's American. But Nebraska's experience, the way it processes this, it's so different. And that has made the entire COVID-19 experience really, yes, Andrew Cuomo in New York, their experience is terrible, but the rest of the country doesn't feel it in that same way. And so as a reporter, I'm always reminded when I talk to people like Pete Ricketts that this is a big country and not everything is the same as New York or New Jersey or these highly populated areas.
A great complaint. In fact, Northern Virginia, where I live, the fetching Mrs. Hewitt came back from California this week after an extended absence. She had to take care of stuff back there, physical therapy. And so it's different. They have a completely different attitude about it than we do in Northern Virginia, which isn't quite New York DEFCON 1 or 5 or whatever is the highest. It's kind of like a 3. Is that where you'd put it, Robert Costa?
I'm actually in Northern Virginia at the moment, and everyone in Northern Virginia is wearing a face mask when you go outside. You go to get coffee, when you go to the grocery store, everyone's in a face mask. And you don't see that in other parts of the country.
I went to King Street on Old Town this weekend. Everybody had a face mask. Everybody. And I talked to my brother in Ohio. That is not the MO in places in Ohio, even though Ohio's been pretty much at the forefront of lockdown-itis.
That's exactly right. And it's partly it's due to the rules and the guidelines and the orders set by the governors in the states, but part of it is cultural, is that it's become a red-blue issue, even though, of course, as you said, it's not a red-blue issue.
Okay, let me conclude this way. I don't believe any of the polls have any significance right now because of the pandemic, because of so much has to happen, running mates, all this other stuff. Is there a recovery? Is the stock market an outlier of reality? Does a force phase do? How much stock do you put in polls that we see right now, Bob Costa?
Look, national polls, I don't put a huge stock in, but I will say this, the troubling point for Trump allies and Trump aides are the polls that show the unfavorables breaking away from President Trump, and that people who don't like Biden or Trump, in the past 2016 election, if they didn't like Clinton and didn't like Trump, a lot of those voters would still break to Trump. Now they're breaking in part to Biden. That's a real problem for many of the Trump insiders I talk to. They need to get those people who don't like the system back on their side a little bit,
I do agree with you. That is the data point. The data point that I think troubles Team Biden is that they're not breaking through. No one's paying any attention to them online. Have you heard that from Team Biden?
Well, pandemic's changed the campaign, and Biden's hoping this VP pick is going to break through in some way. He's going to pick a woman, someone maybe dynamic, and that's the team's way. And that's why not having a convention, having a virtual, that's a real hindrance for the whole Biden operation. They're looking for a spark.
Have they made that decision not to have a convention?
No, they haven't made a formal decision, but things will be virtual in some way.
And what do you hear about the Republicans in conventions?
I hear the governor down there is maybe he may try to put some rules in place for the Republicans, but I hear President Trump's telling everybody we're having this convention.
Interesting. Robert Costa, we will be watching you Friday night on Washington Week in Review. Follow him on Twitter at Costa Reports. Thank you, Robert. Time for me to tell you about our friends over at Angel Tree. We are getting close to the end of this. I do every May. I ask you, I beg you, please help us support sending help to the children who have a mom or dad in jail. 1 out of 28 children in America, it's an astonishing statistic, have a mom or dad in jail. 1 out of 28. We cannot afford to have these kids feel forgotten. We have a responsibility to lift up the next generation, as First Lady Melania Trump has reminded us.
I always said, as a mother and First Lady, it concerns me that today's fast pace can make children less prepared to express or manage their emotions, causing them turn to forms of destructive actions such as bullying, unhealthy habits, risky online behavior, drug abuse, and addiction, or even suicide.
Even suicide. Imagine how much more the pressure is on a kid who does not have a parent at home, and the shame and the stigma that comes from having a mom or dad in jail. So I'm inviting you to take some positive action this morning. Go to HughHewitt.com, click on that Angel Tree banner. A $200 donation sends a special Angel Tree care package to a kid with mom and dad in jail. $150 worth of good grocery gift cards, cool new Bible, sports equipment, which is probably the most important thing to the kid, outreach from Angel Tree, or you can phone your donation toll-free at 888-206-2764. 888-206-2764. I like online. I thank all of you who have helped us, whether it's $20, $200 is enough for one kid, $2,000, $20, whatever you can give, thank you. I also introduced you last week to Giving Masks, and because of your awesome purchases, almost 1,100 masks have gone to hospitals. If you're buying masks, do it at givingmasks.com/Hugh. And don't forget, ReliefFactor.com. There it is. I took it last hour. Take it every day. Tell you about it 3 times a day. Don't leave the home without it. Don't go out there and commute or walk or work or do whatever you're going to do today without your ReliefFactor.com. Get out there, make it happen. Icarian, Curcumin, Resveratrol, and Omega. You'll feel better. Support for the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains. Also, Honor Bound Coffee is run by the same wonderful people, Pete and Seth Talbot, who made Relief Factor such a nationwide sensation. Now Honor Bound Coffee is they're giving back 100% of the profit. 100% of the profit from Honor Bound Coffee go to support military families. Please get your coffee by subscribing to Honor Bound Coffee, and every sip you take will support America's military families. I'm coming back with former Senator Jim Talent talking about the pandemic. He's the expert everybody needs to listen to. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I have just tweeted out Jim Talent's, former senator from Missouri's, latest article on the pandemic, ending the lockdowns and the question of political sustainability. If you're following me on Twitter or Jim at Jim Talent on Twitter, you'll get it. But I think it's very important that you not only get it, that you forward it to people, because what we do, what we learn has got to be retained. Senator Talent, good to have you. Good morning. I hope everyone is well on Team Talent.
Everybody's doing very well. Thank you, Hugh.
I just want to give you the floor so you can summarize. I think this is such a terrific summation of where we are on May 21st and where we need to go in the next few weeks.
Yeah, well, as you know, I've been involved in the issue of pandemic resilience for about a dozen years, and I would sit around talking with experts and epidemiologists, and the subject of quarantines would come up, or general sort of broad confinement of the population, and they never liked it. They always said, no, those things don't work. They have rapidly diminishing returns and rapidly increasing costs, and that's apart from the economic impact. One of the big things they're concerned about, which we're starting to see now and will see, is that when you shut things down, people can't get to their doctors for issues unrelated to the pandemic, and so you end up getting excess deaths for things like cancer and heart disease. But a big part of the problem is when these things stay in force for too long, people just stop obeying them, okay? And you rapidly get the worst of both worlds, okay? So the things are still in place legally, de jure, and so it suppresses economic activity and access to the healthcare system and the rest of them. But because people are disobeying it so much, you don't get any restriction in the vectors of transmission for the disease. And on top of that, the credibility of public authorities, which is really important in a pandemic, starts plummeting. And we're seeing this now. I mean, every morning I get up and I open up the computer and I see 15 more stories about people hitting the beaches or the sidewalks or the private parties or whatever. Look, I'd rather have people go into a pub, which is following some rules, regarding healthy protocols, than packing in somebody's apartment and getting tanked and having some huge party. And
would you repeat that? Because I think that is the crucial takeaway, is that you don't get compliance. You get differentiated behavior. You get altered behavior to achieve the same objective, which is socialization. And we can scorn people, we can shame people, but it won't work. What we end up with is more pandemic.
And then after the shaming stops working, which happens pretty quickly, then they start blowing off everything the public authorities say, right? Because you guys, they just start saying you're crazy. There's a huge percentage of the population that's just temperamentally more risk positive. Okay. Now there are a lot of people who are risk averse, and that's not good or bad on either way. But the risk positive people, you have to persuade, you have to lead. You can't just issue these edicts because they just won't do it. And then what happens is the public authorities start backing down, which they're doing, and then they just look ridiculous, or even more ridiculous than normal. So the point of the column was, look, we're coming out of this shutdown, whether we like it or not. And so let's come out of it in an intelligent way, right? Which and I think we know enough about the disease now to know what that means, which is let's protect the high-risk population. Oh, and another big problem with these things is they're so difficult to communicate and enforce that the public authorities, their time is distracted, and they tend to miss the really urgent things like protecting the nursing homes.
Like Andrew Cuomo is getting hammered. I mean, just killed because people died. I don't think he intended that, but every press conference has gone from a love fest to slings and arrows aimed at Andrew Cuomo because of the nursing home fiasco in New York. Meanwhile, Ron DeSantis, who took all the slings and arrows, is out front of the White House saying, look at our numbers, you dummies. I do think the media may be complicit in trying to push this story into a red-blue lens when it doesn't fit, Jim Talent.
But just see the underlying cause of this is Cuomo has to go on TV and spend 15 minutes explaining why you can't walk in the park, or you can't go to Coney Island or wherever, right? That's time he's not spending with people, asking them, look, what are the really urgent risks here, right? So, and if you read that long interview or that long story that Rich Lowry did on NR with DeSantis, it's clear that he was able to focus, he and his health authorities on, look, what is the really key thing we got to do here? And it's protecting the nursing homes. I mean, I had a pandemic expert tell me this 2 months ago. He said, my big fear is that this gets into the nursing homes. He said it'll go like a wildfire there.
And it did.
So,
and it did.
And this is exactly why they don't like to do these quarantines. Now, I'm not saying that they were wrong as a temporary measure. I make that point in the column. I think they were. I supported them at the time, and I still do. But frankly, they've gone on too long, and I think people need to stop trying to, stop a river from flowing and go on to the next phase of pandemic response.
Excellent piece by Jim Talent. I just tweeted it out, America. If you're following me on Twitter at Hugh Hewitt, you can find the Jim Talent piece. But go and put a follow on Jim Talent, the easiest guy in the world to follow. I don't know how he got the name Jim Talent, because I would have thought it would have been snapped up long before he got there. But he was an early adapter of Twitter. He was early on to the dangers of pandemic, and he's a regular here on the Hugh Hewitt Show. Stay tuned. Chuck Todd of NBC's Meet the Press is next. Morning glory, America, bonjour, hi, Canada, and the 400 affiliates everywhere around the globe, whether you're listening online or on air. Thanks for joining the Hugh Hewitt Show. It's Thursday. We are lucky Chuck Todd joins us. If it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press. If it's Thursday morning, it's Chuck Todd. Good morning, Chuck. I hope everyone is well in the Meet the Press and Todd families.
All okay this week. All okay.
Oh, that is true. Now, I've got an off-the-wall, everyone is good here, off-the-wall question to start. I had Mark Zuckerberg on yesterday for an hour. And it came up. I asked him, did you play Risk as a young man? And he hesitated. He said, yeah, I played it a lot. I liked it a lot. And so did I. Did Chuck Todd play Risk?
I played Risk. I was just, my dad and I enjoyed Stratego a little bit more than he would play Stratego with me. Remember that game?
Oh, yeah. Ed Morrissey from Hot Air immediately called in to lobby for Stratego questions. But I think
I'll be honest, I enjoyed Stratego a little bit more than Risk. I didn't mind Risk. I like Risk, but Stratego it felt like chess meets military strategy, a little bit.
Well, that is, I think board games is going to correlate very highly, and it has thus far with Senator Lankford, General Deptula, with people who end up in the Beltway. I think it's going to board game Beltway. So
you know what my neighbor says? You'll love this about the Beltway. My neighbor grew up. She's an Arlingtonian. Okay, so she's been here so she's a true native. And she says, you know what you have to understand about the Beltway? Everybody who came to the Beltway ran for class president. They didn't necessarily win, but they all ran. I think that's the best description of the Beltway I've heard, and I think if you've been born and raised here, you get to make that. You get to make that observation.
I get to say guilty as well. So
exactly.
Guilty.
Maybe
now
me too.
Let's get the serious stuff. Oh, you're guilty too? That's very funny.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's very funny. Vice President Biden has to pick a vice president. And we talked about this a month ago about the advantages of doing it early. And since that time, poor Stacey Abrams has been puppet on a string. When does Joe Biden decide?
It's interesting. We did discuss this. I think they're in this pandemic when he could use, more spokespeople, more people out there for him. I think there's benefit to doing it earlier. There is something, I think the Biden campaign sees value in creating an American Idol feel or Bachelor feel, whatever you want to pick your reality show. So I do think they do like the local press they're getting in New Mexico about the governor there, or the local press they're getting in Nevada about Senator Cortez Master. So I do think that there is a little bit of that going on here. I think you'll see more dual events, Stacey Abrams sort of showing the way. And I think, what's been interesting about Stacey Abrams is that her aggressive posture at wanting the job has basically forced honesty from everybody else who wants the job. Normally, as you and I both know, it's, I don't know, you don't run for vice president, right? You always hear that comment, but Stacey Abrams has basically changed that game. Yes, I'd love to be, his running mate. And look at now, you have Elizabeth Warren is basically making her own case. And only Amy Klobuchar is playing the old game of, well, I'm not talking about it.
I've read so many accounts of 1960 and LBJ playing that game, and as soon as the phone rang, he ran upstairs, even as Bobby tried to tackle him and stop him. Of course, they all want it, but my question is, Stacey Abrams has been out there so much. Is there going to be a negative impact on Democrats in Georgia if she does not get the gig?
I've been wondering that myself with her specifically. And with Georgia specifically. I think it's a unique because she is got an important following in that state, is a leader in the Democratic Party in that state. So could I see it there? I think the level of disappointment among national folks, if she doesn't get it, will depend on who gets it. If it's Kamala Harris of Val Demings, another African American, I think the disappointment nationally would be muted. Among Abrams' acolytes. But if it's Klobuchar or Elizabeth Warren, then I think you'll start to see some grousing about that and wondering if the ticket's too white.
So I want to go back to that Georgia-specific question. Doug Collins and David Perdue wants her to be toyed with for as long as possible, if that is, in fact, what it turns out to be. A lot of Stacey Abrams events and then no payoff. And I say Doug Collins because I look at those numbers.
I was just going to say, you just made a call, and that raised you.
Well, don't you think those are...
calling the Republican...
Well, rigor mortis is rigor mortis, right?
sometimes it is hard to get out from some things. And, it's funny. There are certain scandals that cross party lines and nobody wants to touch them. And what's interesting now is I think making money in a odd way or looking like you're in a clubby way that you get to make money on a sweetheart deal, I think that is now more lethal than most sex scandals. It's interesting to me to watch this. I think that as a society, we're a little more numb to the sex scandals because look at 2 of our last 4 presidents, right? But we are much more populist, and we're a bit more, we're skeptical in general of Wall Street. And so when some lawmaker, I think in some ways, finance scandals can be the most lethal of all in this current period of American politics.
I have a corollary to the Todd theory, which is when you're fabulously wealthy like Mark Zuckerberg with $70 billion, you can't commit a financial crime. But when you're on the bubble, when you're someone like Richard Burr and you've got a few $1 million and you might be using, that's why I asked Tom Tillis 2 appearances in a row directly. Burr's got to get off of the Intelligence Committee. I believe in the Menendez rule. You don't have to step down unless you're convicted, but he's got to get off of the Intel Committee. And Tom Tillis answered the question both times. I think the Republicans realize what you just said. They can't be near this.
No, they can't. There's been part of me that's wondering, and I know this is crazy, but you're sitting here going, can Tillis win if Burr's still in his seat? If there's been no recrimination for Burr, does Tillis end up becoming the de facto person that maybe some voters want to take it out on it? I've wondered about that. You got to ask yourself what kind of, how, can Loeffler recover from this?
I'm actually not
finishing. I don't know these things, but I'll tell you this. If you told me before November that Loeffler's not an active candidate, would that shock you?
No, because I'll tell you this. I'm bad at Democratic.
If it gets bad and they think, and the party thinks,
you're dead.
God, you're going to, then so she only has a couple of months, I think, to right her ship before she could see a lot of pressure. Thought it was interesting. Her husband just gave a big check to a Trump super PAC. They're trying to dot some I's and they're trying to fix their internal problems, but I don't know if they may be able to fix some internal relationships, but it depends on the voters.
Can I give you an insider poker tell, Chuck?
Be relentless.
This is insider stuff. I've heard nothing. Tumbleweeds from Team Loeffler. Nothing. Doug Collins calls every week. I get him on. Martha McSally's on. Corey Gardner's on. Tom Tillis comes on. I'm very confident about Tillis. I think Loeffler has got rigor mortis, and I don't want to upset anyone over there. I like her. She's fine, but
no, I know what you mean. But it's like I just go back. I just think in this populist era that we live in, with the memory of the Great Recession and still some discomfort, whether you're on Team Blue, Team Red, anywhere in between, you're like, no one paid a price for that. And then you're like, God damn it, these insiders. It's one of those, it's easy to
I think you just cost me a lot of money.
Pitch.
We just had to FCC you, Chuck Todd. We just had to FCC you, I think.
No, I didn't use a curse word.
I think you did, but in any event,
I really didn't. But it's okay.
Let's go back to the vice presidential selection.
I don't want that. In fairness to you, that's one of those things that takes on a life of its own. There is no curse word that I use.
Good. No curse word. Good. Okay. I want to go back to the vice presidential selection. I've got sunk costs in Kamala Harris higher than any bad investment ever. So I'm totally in favor of Kamala Harris, but I also think it makes sense. I don't see how anybody else emerges from this. Is that the whisper? There's always a whisper number before a call.
Well, you know why you come to that assessment? That's why a lot of people have, because when you look around, she's the compromise. If you look at the pick is this, how do I mute as much criticism as I can from certain constituency groups?
Yep.
And, is Kamala Harris progressive enough for Warren acolytes? No, but she's more progressive than Amy Klobuchar. Are some African Americans going to say that she's the best, for the future of African American politics? Some might argue Stacey Abrams, but there will be people, well, I'm glad he picked a woman of color. So it's one of those where she isn't the number one choice of a particular constituency group that matters in the Democratic coalition, but she's not their last choice.
And Nixon's rule was don't hurt yourself.
That matters a lot. Yeah.
Nixon's rule was don't hurt yourself.
I do have one thing that I do think is a negative when you put her on with Biden. a very coastal ticket. Very
Oh.
coastal.
Oh, I like that. As a Republican, I like that. You're right.
I figured you would like it. But I think that San Francisco, it's just very, very coastal. Now, Biden's got a good way of making himself not seem as coastal, but it's still a coastal.
Oh, but he's in a Acela Corridor San Francisco ticket. You just gave it to me, Chuck Todd. You're right. If it's Sunday, you should be watching Chuck Todd for insights like that on Meet the Press. Follow him on Twitter at Chuck Todd. Follow me to the next segment, America. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree Summer Camps.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Out here in the fields. I don't really fight for my meals. No, that's not true. I don't get any anymore because the fetching Mrs. Hewitt has returned. And so my pizza and bagel, peanut butter pretzel, vitamins, and relieffactor.com diet, plus a little chocolate has gone by the boards. That's over. Time for the business story of the morning. And it really is, it's brought to you by Andrew and Todd.com. They are the mortgage specialists at Sierra Pacific Mortgage, 888-888-1172 if you want to call them and their team. They're very best lenders in America. They've served thousands of you, and they continue to serve thousands of you. I always tell you the very best thing to do is go to andrewandtodd.com, fill out the form, and they will get back to you with whether or not you can save money on a refinance, whether it makes sense. And if you're going to buy a new home or an investment property, because interest rates are at their all-time lows, and they are. They're at their all-time lows. All-time. You go to andrewandtodd.com. That is the business story of the day, by the way, is the fact that oil is moving up and interest rates are not. Now, I'll explain to you. I read on the economics. I read the Wall Street Journal every morning, and I pay attention to the data as it comes in as I do the show before noon, wherever you're listening to it. And light crude is up to $34 a barrel, which is great. Markets are returning to normal. People anticipate demand. They're anticipating the reopening, which is actually underway in 49 out of 50 states. And the acceleration of economic growth is everywhere. People are going to go back to work. That's great. But great for you if you want to refinance with Andrew and Todd. Interest rates aren't budging. The 10-year Treasury this morning is at 0.68%. So even though oil is rising, all right, and markets yesterday had a great day. The Dow was up another 369 points. The Dow was up almost 200. The S&P was up a percentage and 3/4. And who knows? I look at Amazon had a day yesterday for the ages, up 2%. As all of America begins to shop at Amazon or Costco or Walmart. I own Amazon. I always check it as the proxy for tech. Still, the interest rate remains at 0.68%, the 10-year, which suggests that investors continue to buy bonds regardless of interest rate. They want the security of American Treasury. Why do they do that? Because they don't know about the world. The virus is running through Brazil. Sao Paulo is just devastated by it. So and it's returned to China. Other parts of the world getting clobbered, even as America emerges from its trial. Other parts of the world getting clobbered. And that means the 10-year Treasury remains low, which means still a great time for you to go to andrewandtodd.com. It's also a great time for you to help out our kids at Angel Tree. Our kids at Angel Tree, 1 out of 28 children in America have a parent in jail. We help them out. The banner is at hughhewitt.com. I've been telling you about it. Do it one more week. I do it every May because summer comes and these kids have got nothing to do, but Angel Tree steps in. Where there is a camp open, they will be sent to that camp. Where there isn't, they will get sports equipment, food, counseling, beginner's Bible, the kind of stuff that they need. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to go to Donald Trump's presser yesterday, cut number 20, talking about what he is working on with Mitch McConnell and the Senate Republicans, cut number 20.
We actually had a very good meeting. The Republican Party, the senators, I think virtually everyone was there. I think you had 53 there. And we had a great meeting. We're looking to do great things for the country. We're helping people with stimulus. We're getting money to people. They need it. And we're going to open up very big. We're going to open up, I call it transition to greatness. That's what it is. It's a transition to greatness. And when Larry Kudlow tells you the numbers, those are really surprisingly good numbers this early in. I mean, we're doing very well. I think it's going to be something special.
Compare that to Joe Biden, cut number 9 on a Skype conference call. Quick.
And we're going to create a new bio-based multi-manufacturing job environment to deal farmers in on the benefits of a changing economy.
Oh, Joe Biden. Somebody's got to run that campaign. I'm glad it's not my job. Don't go anywhere, America. Coming back with former Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price, talking pandemic with Dr. Price on the next segment of the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces.
cut number 8 ready. I'm going to... Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening to the program this morning. Very few people have served as an actual medical doctor who have also served as the chairman of the House Budget Committee and as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. One of those very few people in that Venn diagram is Dr. Tom Price, old friend of the program. Secretary Price, welcome back. Good to have you.
Hey, Hugh, good morning. Great to be with you. Thanks so much.
I read with great interest yesterday your piece for Fox News. Coronavirus highlights healthcare system flaws. This will make it worse. What has the virus revealed about American healthcare?
Well, there are a lot of challenges that American healthcare has, and we've known that for decades. Literally, you and I have talked about it a lot, and certainly your listeners know that. But there seem to be some individuals, and maybe more now than in a long time, who view any challenge to the healthcare system as an opportunity to get government more involved. And so this Medicare for All, a government-run healthcare system, a single-payer system, most people who understand and appreciate the system believe it would make things worse. And so I think it's important to talk about that. There are challenges that we have. But the last thing we need is the government to run our healthcare system.
Now, Secretary Price, what happened at the CDC, in your opinion, when it came to the testing breakdown at the beginning of this crisis?
Yeah, this is fascinating. It's an extremely important question to answer. But I think that if you step back and appreciate that we as a nation are now watching a novel scientific work being done in real time. And scientific work has all sorts of fits and starts. It's got successes, it's got failures, you think you're going down the right path and it's not the right path, and there's all sorts of uncertainty. But most often, the vast majority of the time, that's never seen by the public because it's all behind the scenes. There isn't the urgency of getting it done. So what happened with the CDC is one of the things that happens often is that you try something, it doesn't work the way you thought it was going to work, and then you have to pull back. Now, if they're to be faulted for anything, I think that the fact that there were other tests available around the world that were being used, and seemingly they were unwilling to have those be used in the United States, I think that likely is a fault. But in terms of what they were doing, they were just doing the scientific work that's important to figure out exactly what's going on and how to solve this problem.
Now, Dr. Fauci, when he was on early in the crisis, said to me, no one is to blame for what happened at CDC. There was a technical glitch. I believe that's a direct quote. What's that mean?
Well, again, as you watch these these are all experiments, frankly. I mean, when you have emergency use authorization for a medication, that's an experiment. We don't know that those things are going to work. What we're trying to do is to throw everything in the kitchen sink at this, which is the appropriate thing to do right now. But you can't then blame individuals who come to the table with what they believe to be the best solution or the best opportunity to solve these things, and say, well, you shouldn't have done that, because we don't know what the outcome of all of this is. This is science is uncertain until you figure it out, and this is a new disease. It's not a new type of virus, but it's a new disease, and we're working through it. And it's been a huge challenge, and many people have suffered from it. And God bless the families of those who passed away. But this is not unusual in the scientific method. Now, the last thing you want to do is to put the government in control of all this, because then you would lock down even more what would be the opportunity to solve the problem.
Yeah, I think one of the takeaways I took from your piece on Fox News is that if you want a worse next pandemic, give more authority to the government, because you'll have more breakdowns and less opportunity to recover from them.
Yeah, exactly. And frankly, less transparency. Now, if you look at the exciting things that are going on right now in terms of solving this, the vast majority of it coming from the private sector. The new vaccines, every day we get a new article about a possible treatment that could solve this challenge. And the problem with that is that we won't know whether or not they're going to work until we try them. Normally, that trial, those phased trials that the FDA runs, are outside the public eye. So don't be surprised if there are more fits and starts, if there are more, if there's something that folks talk about as being the panacea, the thing that's going to solve everything. And in fact, it doesn't. That doesn't mean somebody did something wrong. It means that's just the way that this virus is acting, and we're still trying to figure it out.
Now, Dr. Price, yesterday I had Mark Zuckerberg on, and of course, not in addition to Facebook, he helms the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, which is a big science-driven, infectious disease-focused, not-for-profit. I asked him, when do you think a vaccine will be done? He said, honestly, Q1, earliest. The president is more optimistic. What's Tom Price think?
I think it is quite possible that because of all of the resources and all of the work that's being done, that we will have a vaccine that will be able to be tried in large numbers of individuals, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of individuals, by mid-late fall. But Q1 is a reasonable estimate as well. And again, there's no way to know. That's why this thing's so frustrating for the general public, is because Tom Price can't tell you, Anthony Fauci can't tell you, Mark Zuckerberg can't tell you, the president can't tell you when all this is going to happen, because we're doing it in real time before the public's eye.
That is a
learning opportunity for the nation.
That is a great point. It is a great op-ed. Dr. Price, great to have you as always. Good to make touch with you. Let's stay in touch as we move down this pandemic path. Much appreciated. I have got to play for you, America, Trey Gowdy on Fox News with Ed Henry, because I'm not letting go of this General Flynn case until justice is done to him. And Trey Gowdy summed it up yesterday, cut number 8.
Pretty deep, Ed. And, Devin Nunes started this in 2017, and he was scoffed at by the D.C. media and our Democrat colleagues. I hope Lindsay will be able to tell all of your viewers exactly whose name was unmasked in early 2017. I mean, you're right. These surveillance programs are not directed towards Americans. Americans are kind of collateral consequences, which is why we treat their names with privacy, with security, and why unmasking is such a big deal. I think your viewers are going to be shocked at the level and the identity of who was unmasked and who was looked at during this transition time period.
All right, we're going to wait for that, no doubt. Let's break down the email. And substantively, since you were in the middle of investigating some of this, Susan Rice, on inaugural day, writes about the January 5th Oval Office meeting. The President Obama, stressed he is not asking about, initiating, or instructing anything from a law enforcement perspective. He reiterated that our law enforcement team needs to proceed as it normally would, by the book. From a national security perspective, however, President Obama said he wants to be sure that as we engage with the incoming team, we're mindful to ascertain if there's any reason we cannot share information fully as it relates to Russia. Of course, we've since learned that James Comey had no evidence that any classified information was shared between the Russian ambassador and General Flynn. So what stands out from that email? What's going on here?
Just how bizarre it is. I mean, it's 2 weeks late, so it can't be a present, sense recalled. It can't be a contemporaneous recollection of something that happened. It took her 2 weeks. I mean, it's the most bizarre thing I've read. It is, Dear Diary, President Obama is perfect, and Jim Comey says he's done everything by the book. Well, I'd like to know what book he's following. Remember, they're about to close the counterintelligence investigation. It can't possibly, Ed, be a criminal investigation, because remember, Sally Yates don't know nothing about it. She's the top law enforcement official in the country, and this is news to her.
She learns from President Obama, right?
Right. This day she learned it. So it can't be a criminal investigation. And by the way, Comey is both criminal and counterintelligence. The other thing I find shocking about this, Ed, if Susan Rice had been interviewed by Jim Comey that day, he would have followed a completely different book. Remember, he said he did things to Flynn that he never would have done to the other administrations. So I'd like to know what the name of the damn book that they're following is, because it's not the FBI manual. I
hear a lot of critics of the president saying that what you're talking about right now is a conspiracy theory and it's a distraction from the pandemic. And yet, I'm going to give you a chance to respond to that fairly. But Marco Rubio put his finger on something. The senator was on Fox and Friends and said there's something a lot of people are forgetting. Watch.
Elements of a phone call between Mr. Flynn and the ambassador from Russia at the time were leaked to the press. Someone broke the law. Someone took that information, gave it to members of the press, and broke the law. And I think that alone is cause for accountability to find out who did it.
So my point being, even if you can't find anything nefarious in this email and it was some weird meeting happened 2 weeks ago and we never really figure it all out, General Flynn's name was leaked from the unmasking, and that is against the law. Why do people not care about that?
Ed, I wish I knew the answer to that question. Back in 2017, we had Comey and Rogers before the Intel Committee, and the Republicans were ridiculed for asking about leaks and unmasking. It's a 10-year felony. So if you want these surveillance programs to go away, then keep turning a blind eye towards leaks. And my question for the FBI is, I know the links to which you went to interview Michael Flynn. That's well documented. How is your leak investigation going? It's been almost 4 years. How is your leak investigation? We know Flynn was the victim of a crime. We ain't sure he committed one, but we know he was the victim of one. How's that investigation going? And Ed, I'll tell all my fellow citizens, having confidence in the FBI and the DOJ and having them treat everyone the same, regardless of political orthodoxy, is always in style. It's always in season. So it always should be investigated and oversight provided.
I've got 30 seconds. It's clear to me that you don't have confidence in James Comey, the former chief. Chris Wray, a lot of this happened before he was the FBI director, but people, including the president, are wondering what he's doing to clean it up. You have confidence in Chris Wray?
I didn't hire him. You're going to have to check with the guy that hired him. The FBI has had a miserable 4-year period. I was hopeful that Chris would be part of the cleanup crew, as Paul Ryan used to say. Are you part of the cleanup crew or the cover-up crew? That's between he and President Trump. I know this.
Boy,
we need an FBI.
That's damning with faint praise from Trey Gowdy. I think Chris Wray inherited a nightmare. He inherited a burning on a seventh floor on fire. He's been putting out that fire. People I know, I don't know him. The people I know have extraordinary confidence in him, including, by the way, he was a Judge Littig clerk. Judge Littig has an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, along with David Rivkin, most important op-ed written about the economic side of the pandemic. It's titled, Lawsuits Needn't Block Recovery. Congress has the power to limit coronavirus liability. Everybody has to read this piece. We need temporary immunity while businesses reopen. Followed, writes Judge Littig and Mr. Rivkin, by promulgation of a comprehensive set of federal regulatory guidelines, constitutional and consistent, Judge, with Federalist values. I wouldn't want Littig mad at me. It would protect public health while enabling a full and prompt economic recovery. You got to read this. I'm going to tweet it out again. It's the most important thing. We absolutely have to reopen the country, every business, every not-for-profit, every school. We cannot allow plaintiffs' lawyers to be the vultures that descend on everyone, trying to get rich on the pandemic and the panic. And Littig and Rivkin, perfect article. I'll tweet it out again. Let me also remind you, time for ReliefFactor.com, third time of the day. Don't leave home without it. Relief Factor is a support for the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that you get. Now, doesn't work on a thing like a high ankle sprain, which is what the fetching Mrs. Hewitt had. Took her 8 weeks to get over that thing. It just isn't going to repair a high ankle sprain. What it is going to help you with is if you've gone too far or moved too fast or lifted a weight, or even Dwayne on his electric scooter, which isn't really exercise, even if that creates new muscle soreness, that's what Relief Factor is for. Bad commutes, bad backs, bad shoulders. I don't know what you heard on a scooter. Bad grip? You get it like hand on the scooter, Dwayne? I don't know. But ReliefFactor.com will help you. $19.95 is a starter pack. Go and get it. 3 weeks supply worth. And then come right back here for the final segment of today's show with David Cortman of Alliance Defending Freedom here on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
You got the case that I printed off that Cortman wanted to cover?
Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt, joined now by David Cortman, Senior Counsel for Alliance Defending Freedom. You can follow them on Twitter at Alliance Defends. David, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, except I'm a little bit shocked. I know Dedham, Massachusetts, and I thought, and I looked it up, it was founded in 1635 when it was when they held their first public meeting as a city. 18 men signed the town covenant. They swore that they would, quote, in the fear and reverence of our Almighty God, mutually and severally promise amongst ourselves and each to profess and practice one truth, according to that most perfect rule, the foundation of which is everlasting love. They went on to promote explicitly the education of each other in knowledge and faith of the Lord Jesus. So that's 1635. What's Dedham up to recently?
Well, first, I think they're forgetting the history, and that's probably the best place to start. But so, we're hearing all the executive orders around the country, and they're limiting church worship services and what they can do. And you've heard the magic number 10. Everybody's heard that. And so this small startup church, there's only about 30 people, 20 to 30 people. And they said, okay, we're going to honor that. And so we're allowed to have 10 people. What we're going to do is break it up into 2 or 3 services, have an hour between services so we can clean, do the hand sanitizing, do the 6 feet separation, abide by basically everything the government has said, and that shouldn't be a problem. Then they get a cease and desist order, basically from the town board of health, saying you can't even have your church services with 10 people with all those protocols. Otherwise, it's going to be deemed to be illegal.
Now, Pastor Nick White is the pastor of Victory Baptist Church. He turned to Alliance Defending Freedom, as so many pastors do. What does ADF do when they are seeing an obvious second set of rules for a religious institution not being applied to the general public?
Yeah, depending on the situation, we're either sending demand letters or filing lawsuits. We filed 5 or 6. We've got a bunch of them in the works. In this situation, we thought, well, clearly there must be some mistake because the order says they can have 10 people. They have 10 people. There must be something going on. So we actually sent a demand letter to give them an opportunity to fix it before we filed the lawsuit.
Have you heard back from the town yet of Dedham, which again began in 1635 and 1636 as an explicitly Christian church? I love that. A Christian city now stopping a little Baptist. Maybe they're anti-Baptist. Maybe they still have the Puritan thing going, David.
Yeah, who knows? But, so we did hear back from them. They said, well, let us look into it. Can you give us a couple more days? And we thought, sure, but you should be erring on the side of the First Amendment. You should be saying, oh, sure, let's let the church meet until we figure this out, especially because it's compliance with the law. So they ended up letting us know that they're going to allow the church to meet under those circumstances.
Very good. Now, David, you've got to be busier than you have ever been, and you're always busy at Alliance Defending Freedom, because all over the country, governments, for some reason, want to pick on churches specifically. What do you put that animus down to?
Yeah, and it's incredible to me because if you look at what is being allowed, I think what's happening is you have economics or other reasons elevating over faith reasons. And as we know, the Free Exercise Clause specifically protects religious faith. And so yet that's being relegated to, well, this is more important. Like we've heard court cases say, well, it's more important to have a bar open because or a liquor store because we don't want people detoxing in the middle of a crisis, but yet you can't have a church service open. So even some of the reasoning is really odd.
Do you expect any lasting First Amendment jurisprudence to come out of these closures, or is it just a period of time so unique and such an emergency that it's all one-offs?
No, there'll be lasting case law that comes out of this, and because we know we're going to have more crises in the future. These type of viruses pop up, and just a question of how serious they get, how widespread they are, and so there's definitely going to be case law. And the problem is there's some old cases from the 1900s when we had the last epidemic, right? That are now creeping up now that are displacing current First Amendment jurisprudence. And so you have judges going back to 1905 to reach a case instead of what's current in the law. So there's definitely a battle between what the precedent will be coming out of this time.
Has any of it reached a circuit level yet?
There have been a couple of cases in the circuit with varied results. So you have some in the Fourth Circuit, which is the East Coast, and some of the middle of the country, the Sixth and Seventh Circuit, and they're split. Some of them are saying you can't keep the churches closed. when you have other types of businesses and things open. And some of them are saying, well, it's a little bit different in the church because people are there for about an hour, and so you can keep them closed. And so I think this is something that will eventually make its way all the way up to the high court.
Well, that's it. A split in the circuit is usually the magic formula, and it's been a very busy term. We have 30 seconds left. David, how do you think the arguments went in the free exercise clause cases?
Yeah, I thought they went pretty well. I mean, the court's clearly always trying to find a balance. The chief always wants to get as many of the justices on as they can. I think religious autonomy is extremely important. What was interesting to me is you hear some of the justices say, well, if we let these religious organizations decide who works for them, they call it discrimination, that's a bad thing. And the first thing I thought was, well, no, we want to give religious organizations the freedom to decide who should propagate their faith. So hopefully it'll end up in a good way. I think it will.
Follow Alliance Defending Freedom at Alliance Defends on Twitter. Look them up on Google, Alliance Defending Freedom. David Cortman, always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Generalissimo. Don't go anywhere, America. I'll be back tomorrow with Secretary of Defense Mark Esper on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Alliance Defending Freedom.